I mean, the Golden Dome is another one. I hear Republicans, of course, and I also hear, mostly because I'm mostly focused in Canada, Canadian right-wing people saying, I love the idea of the Golden Dome. This guy didn't even finish a third of the border wall in his last term. Like,
Yeah.
what makes you think that he's going to be able to accomplish this in 3 years?
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to episode 55 of Jonny Says So. And my guest today, I don't think needs any introduction to a lot of you, but I'll give him one anyway because I think he deserves it. My guest today is Alex Zoltan. Now, Alex is a crime reporter for True North. He's a political commentator, and he's very active on social media, calling out the establishment. I think he does an amazing job, and it's my honor to welcome you to the show. Welcome, Alex.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem, man. So I was scrolling through Twitter the other day, and I came across one of your posts, which I thought was very well written and thought-provoking. If you don't believe Trump Saviour Syndrome exists, you probably have it. Many sufferers are asymptomatic. Now, I think that is right on the money with just the polarization that exists in the world today. Everybody just seems to be divided into two camps. You know what I mean? Like, all of a sudden, objectivity and being nuanced just goes completely out the window. Where you're on one team or the other, you're either with us or against us. And we've all heard of Trump derangement syndrome. I don't think that needs any explanation. I think we all know people that suffer from it. Full disclosure here. This conversation is sort of irrelevant to us because we're Canadians, obviously. But, like, it's becoming more and more relevant as time goes on, as it turns out. But full disclosure here, guys, like, if I were an American, I would have hands down voted for Trump in the last election. I think it's quite obvious that he was leaps and bounds above the other option, Kamala Harris, which is basically a continuation of the Joe Biden regime. And yeah, but as for Trump Saviour Syndrome, what exactly did you mean by that? Because I definitely want to get into that tonight.
Yeah, so Trump derangement syndrome is, I believe, the belief that, well, yeah, let's define Trump Saviour Syndrome by what it's not. And what it is not is Trump derangement syndrome. And Trump derangement syndrome is, absent of any of the facts, you are going to disagree with anything that Donald Trump proposes, no matter how stupid it is or how smart it is. Trump Saviour Syndrome is exactly the opposite of that, right? It's no matter how absent of data or facts, any idea that Trump or the Trump administration has, you will immediately agree to it. And it's a particularly appealing, well, I guess no disease is appealing. It's a particularly contagious disease in Canada because so many people distrust, quite rightly, our own government. So any government that provides an alternative narrative that is as close as the United States is, as influential as it is going to be very appealing, I imagine.
Absolutely. I think that's spot on.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. I don't know. Do you guys have people with Trump Saviour Syndrome in Nova Scotia?
Trump Saviour Syndrome. I don't know any in my own personal life, but I certainly do think that exists online.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that they're genuine or do you think that they're just cosplaying?
No, I think that they're genuine. I absolutely do think that they're genuine. I don't understand the thought process behind it. It especially gets weird to me when this is all in the context of the tariffs. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Of course.
Because, you know, when the trade war started, a lot of people just sort of, like, especially in Canada, it's very strange. I can almost forgive Americans for having this perspective, but, like, there's this attitude that, like, Trump's coming to save us, and the fentanyl crisis in particular is one I find absolutely fascinating, that people buy into this narrative. Like, yeah, no, we have a problem for sure in this country with fentanyl. Absolutely. Like, but we should be doing these things, like, we should be taking care of it regardless of what Donald Trump says. Do you know what I mean? Like, but America has a problem with it too. And it seems asinine to me that Donald Trump can come out and say that Canada is the problem when it comes to America's fentanyl. And I hate to agree with the legacy media and Justin Trudeau, but they're pretty
I
much
mean,
spot on when they say that, like, yeah, it's a drop in the bucket. I think the figure they
like
used is
I hate it
0.02.
too, but it's one of those like even a broken clock is right twice a day kind of things,
Yeah,
you know.
100%.
But yeah, it pains me too to ever agree with them on anything, but they got this one right at least.
Yeah, they do for sure. And I just find it very strange when Canadians start like sort of going against our own interests, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think my theory on it, again, this is the Trump Savior Syndrome thing, is a lot of people can't disregard the theory that Canada is responsible for America's fentanyl crisis. They can't discard that theory because it's the theory of Kash Patel and Donald Trump. And because they have Trump Savior Syndrome, if they were to discard that, they might have to discard everything else. And it's like a house of cards mentally. Right? Like they just can't handle the idea that Donald Trump could ever be wrong about anything. That's Trump Savior Syndrome, right? It's the opposite of Trump Derangement Syndrome. You know, God forbid, like something like women's sports, right? Donald Trump is obviously, I think 99.9% of us agree that sports should be for women, right? But for the 1.1% of the population that has Trump Derangement Syndrome, him being right on something just makes them completely lose context of like what makes sense, right? And they go kind of morbid and crazy.
So do you think that might be partly responsible for people actually having the take that you know a trans woman should be able to compete in boxing against a biological female, for instance? Like maybe because Donald Trump's against it, they could be okay with someone who's born a man kicking the shit out of a woman. Which
Yeah,
to me,
yeah.
that's like
No, because
to
he's
you.
against it. Because he's against it, now they are for it, right?
Yeah,
A better example, actually, and this is one that like so every once in a while I'll just wake up and I'll do this mental exercise just because I find it so interesting. Do you remember when it was Donald Trump going up against Joe Biden in 2020? Somebody asked Kamala Harris, if Donald Trump is reelected as president, will you take the vaccine? And she said no.
that's one of my favorites.
And every day, almost every second day or third day, I wake up in the morning and I think, if Donald Trump had been reelected, I bet you, because all of us see these our lives so politically, that all of the anti-vaxxers would have been Democrats and people on the left, which actually would have been more logically consistent because they're the my body, my choice people.
Of course.
There's no doubt in my mind. And all of the Republicans would have been lining up to get the vaccine.
Do you think in that weird sort of bizarro world, the Republicans would have been behind the vaccine passports and all of the propaganda?
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. Like they would have, and I think you would have had a lower uptake as well because I think there are more Democrat-minded people who don't vote, right? So I think you probably would have been at like 70% uptake rather than 80 or 90.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would have been. I do remember the propaganda well, though. It was when Donald Trump was still president, and they were announcing the rollout of the vaccine. There were a lot of like prominent people in the media and celebrities saying, "I'm not taking the Trump vaccine," which, looking back on it, yeah, there's a Twitter account called Defiant L's. I think if you go back far enough, they've got actual screenshots of celebrities saying they're not going to take the Trump vaccine, and yeah, it just the script completely flipped. But it's interesting you bring up the 2020 election with Trump Savior Syndrome because I remember where I was at with Trump in like into 2020, and I was so done with him when it came to the COVID insanity. Because I remember, do you remember when he was debating Joe Biden? I think it was maybe their second debate. They were arguing about who was better with lockdowns, and
Right,
Trump
right.
was like using this as some sort of flex on Biden, being like, "I wanted to lock down first. Joe Biden wouldn't lock you down as hard as
Right.
I would. I'm going to get the military to put the vaccine right in your arms." Do you remember that one?
I do. And he was like, I locked down China before we even knew there was a virus, and yeah, it was ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah,
But the people who have Trump Savior Syndrome, for whatever reason, they have one of the symptoms of Trump Savior Syndrome is selective memory. So they will just remember some things but not others. They blame, of course, the Biden administration for the lockdowns, but they don't blame Trump for 2 weeks to flatten the curve, which of course led to the lockdowns, right? They blame him for the mandates. They blame Biden for the mandates, but they don't remember that Trump is the one behind Operation Warp Speed and so on and so forth.
Yeah, 100%. He was bragging about these things. And actually, he was bragging about this well into 2022, I believe.
And then
Like,
on the fentanyl issue, people will say, well, if it wasn't for Trump, like we wouldn't have caught that big fentanyl lab in BC. But that lab bust happened in October. It happened before Trump was president. So you also have this Mandela effect, right? In terms of selective memory. Right? Everything good that happens is because of Donald Trump, regardless of timeline. It's really strange. It's bizarre.
yeah, and just the tariffs in general, just to me, seems like bad economic policy, just in general, because you're trying to. I understand why people in the states kind of support it, like in the short term, as like a bargaining chip to get what you want. But beyond that, I don't know. I don't know about you, but I kind of believe in. I believe taxation sometimes is necessary, but for the most part, it's a form of theft. So, like, I go to work, I work my ass off, and they take, whatever, 27, 31% of your check or whatever. So, income tax is a tax on work, and tariffs are a tax on trade. And to me, I just find that to be really bad economic policy. And when you're using it as like a bargaining chip to make threats, I just I don't see how people that are supposedly for small government and like
Exactly.
libertarians even support this. I mean, we all know about American libertarians and their opposition to the IRS, but Donald Trump has campaigned on establishing the ERS, or the External Revenue Service. If you don't like the IRS, that should scare the shit out of you. But maybe not, because it's not in your own country. But
Yeah, I mean, like the one of the first rules of economics is scarcity, right? So people will make decisions on the margin, and but you can't really change certain things. You can change human behavior, but you can't like stop fentanyl consumption with tariffs. Like I
yep,
don't that doesn't even make sense logically. It's like trying to change the weather with taxes. Like this is literally the worst idea since Trudeau thought he could change the weather with taxes. This is the dumbest idea, almost the dumbest idea I've ever heard.
100%. Like, and when Justin Trudeau was briefly still our prime minister before he ran to the hills, when he was sort of at least giving out the optics that he was capitulating to this, like it was, the whole thing was so embarrassing and clownish, cartoonishly absurd, I would call it, because we're bragging about how we're putting helicopters in the sky. Like, how long is our border, man? Where are these helicopters? How many?
Exactly, exactly. I mean, we've been putting these helicopters in the sky. We spent like $1.3 billion, where we're spending it over 3 years, on improving land border security when there has never been a notable southbound seizure of fentanyl from Canada to the United States ever. Like nobody would ever do this. It doesn't even make logical sense. Fentanyl sells for more in Canada than it does in the United States. Like you'd have to imagine that these undetectable ninja traffickers are taking fentanyl in backpacks from Winnipeg on foot down to Fargo, North Dakota to sell the fentanyl for less than they could have sold it for in Winnipeg. Like, why is anyone going on this journey?
It doesn't make any sense. And actually, I'm a native of Winnipeg, so like I could attest that there's probably a better market for it in Winnipeg than there is in Fargo,
In
North
Fargo.
Dakota. And to anybody from Manitoba listening, sorry, I get to make fun of you guys because I was born there. So
Yeah, and it's this really it's honestly been one of the most bizarre conversations I've ever had to have with people because it kind of indicates to me how a little bit financially illiterate a lot of people are. And I'm not trying to be rude about that or anything, but people will say things like, well, it's going to the United States because there's more people, so the market is bigger. Right? Like they've completely forgotten about the supply dynamic of the supply and demand
yeah,
analysis, right? Like the United States has 61,000 kilograms of fentanyl going into it over the last 3 years. So to put that into context, that's 13 billion lethal doses. So when we talk about Falkland, oh, it's enough time to kill every Canadian twice over. 13 billion is enough to kill every person on the planet twice over. Like they're flush full of fentanyl. There's no reason anyone would take it over the land border from Vancouver to Seattle or Winnipeg to Fargo or Toronto to New York. It's just complete nonsense.
Yeah, and again, not to agree with Justin Trudeau and the legacy media, but that absurd amount that you just listed, a lot of that comes through. You did a very good job breaking this down on Twitter, but a lot of it comes through ports in Los Angeles and on the western United States and over the Mexican land border. Like we are literally less than 2% here. So to enact these devastating economic policies on us, we could talk about the true motives behind those if
Well,
you
and
want, but
really good journalists like Sam Cooper and Kim Bolan have both reported, I think, quite accurately, and I would agree with them on the notion that Canada is now a net exporter of fentanyl. So we actually export, we send out more than we take in. But it's not going to the United States because, again, these cartels are not dummies. They're going to send it to wherever it fetches the most dollars. That's true of economics generally, right? Products will find the highest price. So it's going to Australia and it's going to Western Europe. And all of the data fleshes that out quite nicely. And in fact, what's really funny is in this most recent bust that they just did, they found, well, I can't remember, I think it was 60 kilograms of drugs, and more than 2/3 of it was coming in, not going out. Like the drugs are coming into Canada, generally speaking, but we are exporting fentanyl, but we're primarily exporting it to places where it will get more money than it would in the United States.
So do you think this is by design then, or do you think it's just opportunists taking advantage of our weak security?
I just think it's people not paying attention to the data. Like it kind of reminds me a little bit of COVID in the sense that like what the flu disappeared. Now we have this new thing. Like maybe it's just the flu. Like we should actually pay attention to the numbers here.
Yeah, God forbid you pay attention to the numbers and actually question these things for yourself. Because again, like this is why I wanted to talk about Trump derangement syndrome versus Trump Savior Syndrome. I believe we have two different camps in Canada. We have the sky is on fire. Donald Trump is literally going to attack us. He's going to nuke Toronto and take us out in an afternoon. That's things that I've actually overheard in my daily life. Not from people I hang out with, mind you, but like I've actually heard people chit-chatting about this stuff. And on the other side, we have Donald Trump is going to save us. Canada, like all of a sudden overnight, we became this evil fentanyl exporter. It's and there's just no room for nuance. It seems.
Yeah, like neither of those things seem plausible to me.
Not at all.
Possible that none of those things are true?
And back to what you said about like how this time reminds you of COVID. It's also true in that any crisis that comes about, whether naturally or created, the powers that be will use it as a means to seize control. Like we all saw how this looked during COVID. We don't need to hash all that out, although we can later if you want. But it seems that the trade war is very similar in that it's created this groupthink mentality with elbows up, and any sort of questioning the narrative whatsoever gets you labeled a traitor. Like not even having Trump Savior Syndrome, like even the conversation we're having, like anywhere in the middle, like if you're not with Mark Carney and the Liberals, you're against the country. I've gotten this vibe, and I find it very disturbing, to be honest.
It is very disturbing because I will say to people, I think that Trump's claim that fentanyl is pouring into the United States, that's his language, pouring in versus trickling, right? That's the language is important. He says it's pouring in from Canada to the United States. I said, I think that claim is bogus. And people will say, so you're saying that Canada doesn't have a fentanyl problem? So you're saying that, everything that the CBC and Mark Carney says is correct, right? You get Kathy Newman all the time as if like criticizing Trump is akin to supporting the Liberal Party. And it's so bizarre. It's just, I don't know how to have these conversations.
Yeah, 100%. And speaking of Trump and the Liberal Party, it's just what happened with this past election is just, I don't want to say it's the most bizarre election cycle I've seen in a while, because the recent election of Trump takes the cake, hands down. That was the strangest thing to watch in real time I've ever seen in my life.
In the face this time.
Nobody got shot in the face. You didn't have like a largely unpopular candidate just completely drop out after getting COVID, after saying that he wasn't going to drop out. Like that whole thing with Biden just all of a sudden dropping out of the race and Kamala Harris just steps up to the plate. That was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen in my life. So
Yeah,
ripe with gaslighting. So yeah, no, I'm not going to claim that our
yeah.
election was wilder than that.
And I also haven't reached the point of wishing Kamala Harris was president.
No, no, absolutely not. I just feel, yeah, thank you. No, I feel like we can have a conversation about what a letdown Trump has been so far in basically most of the things he said he was going to do without being accused of being some libtard or whatever you want to, whatever names you want to throw at us. But it's true. Like these things need to be said. Like, I liked a lot of what happened with DOGE. Well,
You know, Elon Musk just quit, right?
oh yeah, no, I do
In the
I do
last
know that.
24 hours.
Yeah, I like. I should rephrase that. I like a lot about what was talked about with Doge because it's a lot of talking with these people, right? I like the things they were saying, but I'm just at this stage of the game, I'm not convinced anything's going to be done. Like Donald Trump throwing Thomas Massey under the bus, who's like arguably one of the only people around him with principles. You know what I mean? Like he seems like he's the only one that actually wants to get a handle on spending.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really pay that much attention to US politics, to be honest with you. I just pay attention to big budget items or things that they say they're going to do. And
Yeah,
Donald Trump is really bad at doing that. I remember
100%.
I hate to again agree with the legacy media, but David Frum said it best. He goes, Donald Trump's superpower is promising things to his base that they just conveniently forget about. I mean, like, promising that you're going to end the Russia-Ukraine war in 24 hours. Such a crazy claim. And then it's just like nobody cared that he is now talking more about invading Denmark than about peace in Russia and Ukraine. Like, that's crazy to me.
That's very crazy. That's one of the things that I was when people would accuse me of being some sort of like MAGA supporter or whatever, as if that's like really should be a thing in Canada. But that's one of the things that I was optimistic about. People would ask me honestly if they were trying to have a genuine good faith discussion with me. They would say, "Well, why do you think Donald Trump would be better than Kamala Harris?" And my one answer would be Ukraine. He's
Yeah.
talking about peace and they're openly talking about war. Like it doesn't seem reasonable that, people from North America should have to worry about like our children getting drafted and going to fight in a war on the other side of the planet. It doesn't seem to me like that's in our best interest. So anybody who's actively trying to speak out against that, I'm going to support 100%.
Yeah, and I think like that also, like, just to return it back to Canada, that was a huge PPC contagion, right? As people said, well, Pierre Polyev should just do everything like Trump does, and he should say he's going to stop the war. Well, it turns out saying things doesn't just magically make them happen. Right? Like, you have to be there. There's no adult in the room, I don't think, in the Trump administration right now. It doesn't seem clear to me that there is one. Right? Maybe JD Vance, but he has no real power, right? Like,
Yeah, I did like that whole signal chat thing was really bizarre to watch, but I like it is interesting to note that during the signal chat, JD Vance was the only one saying like, "Hey guys, maybe dropping bombs on Yemen isn't a good idea." So at least
yeah.
he had that. I liked a lot of what he had to say on Theo Vaughn's podcast, but again, it's all just talk with these people. Like Epstein is another really really
Oh
interesting one that
man,
these
don't even get
people.
me started. That was the most outrageous thing. That was the one that really gave me, if I'm anywhere on the Trump derangement syndrome spectrum, that was what put me there. Was the Epstein thing, because it was just the most offensive form of virtue signaling I've ever seen in my entire life. Having those influencers walk around with the binders with no new information.
Yeah, 100%. And just Kash Patel just coming out and saying, yeah, he killed himself. There's nothing more to see here. After Trump campaigned on finding the answers to that whole thing,
And having like
how
the
many
libs of
times did he bring it
TikTok
up?
girl march it around like it's a big accomplishment was just so bizarre.
Yeah, nothing to see here. It's just yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you said these people just all of a sudden they get a collective amnesia when it comes to stuff like that.
How do you, like, I guess, yeah, and things will not return to normalcy until he's gone, the end of this term. I mean, the Golden Dome is another one. I hear I hear Republicans, of course, and I also hear, mostly because I'm mostly focused in Canada, Canadian right-wing people saying, I love the idea of the Golden Dome. This guy didn't even finish a third of the border wall in his last term. Like,
Yeah.
what makes you think that he's going to be able to accomplish this in 3 years?
Especially when you consider what an achievement the Golden Dome would be. I mean, what does Israel call theirs? They have
The Iron Dome.
the Iron Dome. Thank you. Yeah. So, yeah, you look at the landmass of Israel, and you look at how much money. I almost said Israel spent on the Iron Dome, but how much money America spent on the Iron Dome, and you think they're just gonna recreate that thing over North America?
Well, and the Iron Dome borderline makes sense in Israel because it's a place where people shoot missiles into it. But like, when was the last time someone shot a missile into North America? Never. Like, this is completely ridiculous.
The weather balloons, remember that?
Yeah,
Maybe
that's
this thing,
right.
maybe
That's
this thing
right.
could have found the weather balloons flying over the Rockies.
I mean, we're dealing with problems. It's just like the fentanyl thing. We're dealing with problems that don't exist rather than the problems that do exist. Like, how about we like give everybody clean drinking water and get the rapists in prison? Like, doesn't that seem like the low-hanging fruit here?
Yeah, I mean, when you say it like that, it's so obvious, but it's true.
Like, most of the threats to your life are under the dome, sir.
Yeah, under the dome. That's good. Oh man.
Oh man. You know, and like, what is it? What's the cost for that thing? Is it 80 billion with a B or something? Like, that's the estimated cost. Of course, government, you always got to multiply it by 10.
I don't
You
know,
know,
but I feel like Trump said that Canada's share of it would be upwards of $30 billion. So
no, not $1 until you finish the wall, sir.
yeah,
Not $1.
the wall that is I do believe the Great Wall of China is longer
Oh
than
yeah,
what
it's
it
way
would take.
longer.
Yeah,
He only built 80 new miles. Did you know that? Everything else was reinforced. It was already existing fencing.
I did
Yeah,
not know that.
yeah. He only built 80 new miles.
And you're talking about the first Trump administration, right?
Yes, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
what a joke. How many miles have been constructed since?
I don't know. I just know that as of the end of the last term, it was 80 new miles. So we're at about a third completion. Yeah.
That's pretty dismal. That's not a good accomplishment. Doesn't give me
Even if you're a hardcore Trump supporter, right? Because I try to be empathetic and try to understand other people's points of view. Wouldn't you want that project completed first before you move on to some mega project like after the fact, right? Like, does common sense not apply here?
it should when it comes to being able to finish a stone or steel fence versus like a complex I don't know what you would even call it, like a aerospace defense system with satellites and long range missiles over how large is North America? Is that a good third of the world? A third of the planet almost?
It's a huge amount of space. I
Yeah.
think it's like 10,000 or either 1,000 or 10,000 by orders of magnitude bigger than Israel. Like, there's just no way that you're going to be able to do this in 3 years. In my opinion, I think it's very unlikely. And the old argument I used to hear was, well, you have Elon Musk. Well, that was true until like 48 hours ago.
Yeah.
You don't even have that now.
But I
And
mean, I think Elon Musk is starting to figure out that this whole Trump thing is going to be over in 3 years. I've already like torpedoed my reputation and lost billions of dollars. Maybe I should just go back to focus on being a successful businessman. Maybe I should just go do that. That's probably what Musk is thinking.
yeah, I think he hitched his pony. I think even he's like probably in a similar place, it seems like, just circumstantially to like where you and I are mentally, I think. Like, not quite at the point of wishing Kamala Harris was president, but also not willing to put his full weight behind the president at this point in time.
Yeah. I think he might just be burned out. I think he might be a little bit busy.
I think we all are
Yeah.
with this whole Donald Trump thing. Yeah. You know what's really weird is like I feel like Donald Trump makes people scared of issues that they would not otherwise be scared of. That's another one of his superpowers. So if you recall as well, at the beginning of that 2016 election, the first time he got elected, like it seems like you're a guy that's kind of glued in. Immigration was not even one of the top issues until he came around, and then he made his, the rapists and all these kind of comments, and I'm going to build a wall, and it just really appealed to a wide range of voters, and I'm not really sure why. And I feel like this is the Golden Dome is another example of that. Like missiles, like who the hell was talking about missiles 6 months ago? Like that was their biggest concern.
Yeah, I could see that perspective, but I will say that it's probably a larger number of people probably are thinking about missiles with the failure of the Trump administration to end the war in 24 hours. I'm going to end it 24 hours, not even before I'm elected. I'm going to end it. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be incredible. It's going to be the best peace process you've ever seen.
Believe me. And that's one of his favorite phrases is "believe me," but at a certain point, one must stop believing.
100%.
Right? Yeah,
absolutely. I don't know. I want him to do good. I wish the Americans well. Obviously, like again, to borrow what you said, like I'm not at the point of wishing Kamala Harris to be the president. I never will wish that. But yeah, the whole thing has been really disappointing to watch, and it's just it bums me out when I still see people being so polarized over it. It's it's just really tragic that people can't just step outside of their own little bubbles and see it for what it is.
Yeah, like there are some good things and some bad things, and you have to call them out on both ends, right? There's just some people, as you said, lack nuance. So.
Yeah, 100%. But so back to Canada. Like, do you think there's any possibility that behind the scenes, this whole trade war thing is sort of a smokescreen for Donald Trump to, let's be honest here, I'm going to get a little bit conspiratorial here, but
sure.
Because if it's not about fentanyl, because that's what he claimed it was about, if it's not about fentanyl, then what could it really be about? Because the result that we saw from all this trade war rhetoric was Justin Trudeau, who Donald Trump really didn't like. And before the trade war thing, Trudeau was very unpopular. And it seemed that his ego wasn't going to let him step down. Like it seemed like he wanted to stay on as leader and go ahead with an election. Well, not go ahead with an election, but stall it as long as he could, stay as leader of the Liberal Party. And it was really the trade war that kicked off his resignation. That and the whole thing with the budget and Chrystia Freeland. But do you think it's at all possible that behind the scenes there was some sort of understanding between Trump and Mark Carney?
No.
No.
I don't think the United States spends any time thinking about Canada.
So you think the 51st state stuff is really just...
yeah, he was trolling. We got trolled out of the best result possible because Canadians think a lot about what Americans think about them, and Americans don't think anything about Canadians.
Yeah, no, I could be won over to that perspective. To me, that's the most egregious thing Donald Trump has ever or will ever do. Maybe Americans might disagree, but like from my perspective as a Canadian, if I were to have Trump derangement syndrome about one thing, it would be this. It would be leaving.
We had a guy, even if you don't have Trump derangement syndrome, I think this is completely outrageous. So we had a guy who said he was going to end the Russia-Ukraine war in 24 hours, and instead what he's talking about is invading Canada and Denmark. Like, are you kidding me? That is so just crazy. It just breaks all of the norms of geopolitics that we have established over the last 70 years. I hate to sound again like David Frum or like these legacy media people, but I think anybody that knows anything about history and cares about civics and norms and just would agree that that's really strange.
Yeah, 100%. And the minerals deal was really that was disappointing. You know what I mean? Like that was his big play to bring peace to the region, was to somehow put Russia in a situation where if they were to push further into Ukraine, they would be, disturbing U.S. interests. But really, that's quite the risky move on the chessboard, because that, brings us a little closer to a mutually assured destruction, if you will. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, like again, bringing back to Canada, like I think what made Trump Saviour Syndrome, I think, was a more poisonous contagion in the Canadian political bloodstream than Trump Derangement Syndrome. Because if you looked on X, for instance, well, I mean, my X feed, of course, is filled with conservatives, and everybody was criticizing Polyev for being too critical of Trump. But now, if you look back on what he was being critical of, like he said, how does it make sense to levy a 25% tariff on Canada and a 10% tariff on China if the tariffs are over fentanyl? He was making good points, but a lot of conservatives just could not believe, they could not think, they could not hold two views simultaneously.
yeah.
Right? That they could like Trump, but they could also like somebody who doesn't like Trump. And I don't know if that just speaks to like a shallowness of our thinking, or like what is that? Like what does that say about conservatives? Like,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, there was a lot of, I felt like some of the, okay, granted, the entire world isn't X, but like, I don't spend a large amount of time on the internet, believe it or not. I know that sounds odd, from somebody who like has a YouTube show about Canadian politics, but like, I try to spend more time with my family and just like touching grass and being offline. But like I do spend a fair amount of time, I will admit, scrolling through Twitter. And like I agree with your analysis of it. Like at least on Twitter, I found that the worst, like Pierre Poilievre was getting hit harder from the right than the left. And I made one video that was critical of Pierre Poilievre, and it was just about like his Ukraine messaging. And it was, my take was more that like, we shouldn't be stoking tensions with Russia. We should be focused on peace and staying the hell out of something that doesn't involve us. I don't want ever to be in a situation where Canadian kids have to go die over this. But yeah, no, that
right.
one video I did that criticized Pierre Poilievre did a lot better than a lot of my other videos. And yeah, no, there seems to be this thing in the algorithm that just criticizing Pierre Poilievre was very in with conservatives, or PPC bros, I guess, is another one.
There's a lot of them. They apparently don't vote as much as they talk. Right.
Yeah, and they only come out of the woodwork to talk about this stuff when an election is like imminent.
Yeah,
I'm
and they
not
only
talking like an election is called, like all of a sudden it's down to the wire and just Bernier appears out of nowhere. Um,
Yeah, it was the strangest. Yeah, it was the strangest election cycle. The whole narrative just changed, and everybody was focused on Trump. And the people on the right were like, "Well, he's not kind enough to Trump," and the people on the left said he's too much like Trump.
that
Well, I mean, that's what made no sense, right? If you were somebody who's a nuanced, middle of the road thinker.
Yeah, no, that both of those things you said were spot on. I don't even know which one is more frustrating, to be honest. No, I'm going to go with the left. The left was
Yeah,
more frustrating about Pierre Poilievre, because saying he's too much like Trump, I couldn't. Oh my God, the whole Maple MAGA thing. Every time I read that comment, Maple MAGA, I can't not read it in Chrystia Freeland's voice, because like that's her zinger. Like, Mr. Speaker, the Maple MAGA conservatives. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just,
well, yeah, and like,
it's low hanging fruit, but it's true.
and the people on the right, like, yeah, I will agree, the people on the left were more frustrating, but the people on the right were frustrating in the sense, and I will actually lay some blame at the feet of the conservatives and the conservative think tank at this on this point, because I don't think, at first I thought Polyev was disagreeing with Trump because it was good political calculus. But now looking back on things, because let's face it, anybody who was voting for Trump was probably voting for Polyev anyway.
100%. I don't think he was losing. A lot of his base would talk big, but at the end of the day, they're still going to vote for him. Sorry, I cut you off, but go ahead.
No, absolutely. So I thought at first, well, it makes sense for him to disagree with Trump because you have to get votes from the middle. But then as time went on, I realized, no, I actually think he's being genuine. And I've had the opportunity to ask Polyev questions face to face. I think like if you can criticize Polyev, you can criticize him of many things, but one thing you can't criticize him for is being inconsistent. He's had the same consistent beliefs about the economy and about having low taxes and small government since high school. And all of these Trump initiatives are not really true conservative initiatives. More tariffs is more government. That's more taxes, right?
Yes.
It was antithetical to Poilievre's raison d'etre as a politician. Like, if he had agreed with Trump, he would have been disregarding his entire life. Like, not just as a politician, but as a human being. He would be discarding all of his previous politically stated beliefs.
Yeah, 100%. And not only would it have been bad politically, but I think just like as a person, like all of these politicians to a certain extent, they are looking out for themselves. They are saying things to get elected. But like Pierre Poilievre to me strikes me as a little bit different. I know you've said you've had the opportunity to like ask him questions face to face, but I actually met the guy once. He came to a rally in Windsor, Nova Scotia, and I went. It was a great speech. It was just a couple weeks after the Apple viral video, actually. So like at the start of it, great energy in the room. This wasn't even an election cycle, and he completely packed a community center. Like I don't know how many people. Like if I hadn't have gotten there an hour early, I wouldn't have gotten in. But like I managed to get pretty decent seats, and he was hucking apples out into the crowd. And afterwards, he stayed and he talked to every single person that wanted to stay and talk. Most of the room cleared out, but like, you know what I mean? There was a good like 150, 200 people left that all wanted to talk to him. And he spent like 4 or 5 minutes with them. Like I had all these questions. Like I think I was going to ask him something about vaccine mandates or something. And then like, I was talking to him and we just ended up like having a conversation about raising our kids, like a normal conversation. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, he's a real normie actually.
And it was to the point where like his aide sort of had to like tap him on the shoulder and like gesture towards the line. And then he was just like, it's great to meet you, man. Like, let's get a picture. Boom, done. But like genuine guy, 100%. And yeah, so I feel like he's a lot different than these politicians and that he actually genuinely cares about Canada. So back to the point that you were talking about was like, of course he wasn't going to agree with Trump. Of course he wasn't going to be like, yeah, absolutely, fuck Canada. Like, we deserve tariffs. Like, is that what these people wanted to hear? Like,
they did, and they still do. This is what's so bizarre. They did, and this I think speaks to what is it? I can't remember the name of the guy, the Russian guy who talks about the demoralization of society. Like, if you want to completely take over a society and make it communistic, what you have to do is demoralize the people so they don't care anymore. And I think like this is kind of what's happening right now, right? Is people are so distrustful of their own government that any nut job who says anything that is contrary to the Trump claims, it's not from Canada. People just automatically go, well, it must be true, because everything everything Trudeau says is a lie, right? Or the Carney government says is a lie. So whatever person X says must be true, right? It's very, very like kind of baseline thinking though, no? Like,
yeah, 100%. Like, yeah, none of that tracks to me. And just the whole thing from the left against Poilievre is even more frustrating when they say that like he's just like Trump. Couldn't be further from the truth. So like he truly was in between a rock and a hard place with the election. Like it seems like once the trade war stuff happened, once the tariffs got going, once elbows up became a thing, no matter what he did, he was fucked. He just sort of had to like
a rock and a hard place. Well, I think it just went against his principles. And maybe I'm doing savior syndrome. Maybe I am guilty of Pierre Poilievre savior syndrome. Maybe we both are.
Perhaps. That's a good point. I default to all politics really is to me is you know what? No, that's a fair criticism. I'll take that because I have a YouTube channel, and during the election cycle, half of my videos I would say were just like vote for Pierre Poilievre. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't like ending my videos with that, but I was basically like making the case to people why I found Mark Carney to be a terrible option and why I found Pierre Poilievre to be better and genuine. So how did you get into journalism?
Oh, so what happened was I was working in finance, which is why off air we were just talking about RRSPs and stuff.
Yeah.
So that was my background. And I broke my arm actually in Halifax. And I had like a bit of a tough time, like, recovering from that. And then I went traveling around Greece to like fix my arm because the surgeon told me to get lots of sun. And then when I came back from running around trying to fix my arm, I was just stuck in the office and I felt kind of bored. So I thought I'd really like to become a journalist. So I started, even as while I was working at the bank, I started covering the Coots trial, where I started doing what they call like internet sleuthing. That's what they call it. So I started investigating that case. And then the guys called me from jail. And then I decided to go out there to the trial. And I kept going back and forth so often that I was like, I'm just going to quit my job and just do this for a year and see if anything comes out of it. Then I got an offer to become a crime reporter. It's basically
That's a really awesome story. So you got into this like covering the Coots trial. You just you felt passionate enough about it that you just decided this is what you want to do. You quit your job and you followed the story and you went.
Yep. Yeah, and I did it for a year, and I got offered a job like maybe 2 days before Christmas. I was like kind of ready to give up. I was making just enough to like get by.
That's awesome, man. That's actually very inspiring. It's like you strike me as sort of like a gonzo journalist. So
Yeah, it's been a little bit like that for sure. It's been really fun. Yeah.
I mean, you have made some waves. Okay, there's no denying that. I think it was fascinating watching you get to ask a question of Mark Carney during the after the French language debate, I believe, right? Was that
Yeah, so that was the first day.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I believe there was no press scrum on the second day.
Correct.
Yeah. Do you think it's fair to say that maybe your question might have been the catalyst to that?
People have said that. I will. No, I will. I don't. Maybe. Who is to say? But like, okay, so let me just first of all apologize to the Canadian public for a few things. So first of all, obviously I looked homeless. I could have looked nicer, but but like to give you full context, so I was working with another guy who works for True North Clayton Domain, and him and I were doing real journalism. He went to journalism school. I did not go to journalism school. I'm a banker turned journalist. So he wanted to do streeters all day. He's like, let's just like ask people questions on the street. And that's what we did. And it was a pouring snow. And then we got to the place and it was dark. I didn't know everybody was dressed up in suits. And I didn't think it would be this easy to get a question either. Like, I didn't think that it would be as simple as just lining up early. And that's all we did. That's how we got those questions in, is we just lined up early. So had I known it was going to be that easy, I would have like shaved and, like worn a suit or whatever.
Yeah, I feel like that was my jaw hit the floor when I saw that clip, man. Like that was such a, not just because you looked homeless, but like the the content of the question itself, like just to get up in front of Mark Carney and just to ask him that question. Like the question, I believe the exact phrasing of it was how many genders are there?
Zoltan with True North. If you thought my friend's question was odd, you're going to love this one.
I'm glad you self-assessed that. Okay.
How many genders are there?
There, in terms of sex, there are two. Thank you.
My follow-up question then, do you believe that women, biological women, have the right to their own spaces, their own sports, their own change rooms, their own prisons, their own homeless shelters?
I think this is Canada, and that as a general objective, yes. But we work in where we value all Canadians for who they are, and we'll continue to do so. Thank you very much.
Well, the other reason I asked that question, so I had like 9 different questions that we had all kind of we didn't know who you were going to be able to ask a question to. So we had 9 questions per leader. And the reason that one appealed to me amongst all the ones that I had written down was because when I was going through Montreal and talking to people in Montreal really just didn't care about anything but Donald Trump. And so I just wanted to ask the furthest question from anything that had to do with the narrative that was already being presented by the mainstream media. I kind of wanted to ask a question as if like what would a kid ask? If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I suppose that does make sense. No, I just I
Like a
just
childish question, like in a sense, to like bring things back down because we know nothing about his social views or his personal views.
no, we know a lot about his economic views. I mean, there's his book Values, but I think it was a fair question to ask. I saw a lot of pushback on Twitter about it though. Like people accusing you of like injecting American style culture war talking points into this, but I think it was just such an interesting question to ask him because it was sort of like to show like the hardcore lefties like where he falls on it. You know what I
Well, I
mean?
thought that was the fun thing about the question too, is that I hit him from the left.
Yeah.
I asked.
I wasn't prepared for it. I thought that was a great question. Personally,
Well,
like I probably would have pressed him on like the Freedom Convoy or something like that because he was the one
of
who
course, he
he
recommended freezing bank accounts, and that was originally my first question. But
oh
also originally context as well. So I don't know if you saw Kean Bexte's question, but he said, he was being really rude to Kean Bexte. And then amongst all these questions I had rolling around in my head in the Rolodex, they said, you have to go quick. So I just picked the quickest one I had as well, right? Like just the punchiest one. And it came out a little bit pricklish. I guess I went a little hard on the Surrey serial killer energy. I didn't realize it until the next day when the police showed up.
when the police showed up. Yeah, so I want to talk to you about that because that was the there's a lot of hyperbole sometimes from like our quote unquote side
Well,
sometimes, but like I really do feel like we're becoming a banana republic sometimes. Like when I
before we jump ahead to that, the second, because I was given a follow up. So, and I think it's important because the only thing I feel bad about looking homeless was not necessarily looking homeless, but I think I did the question a disservice because I think the follow up was a really important question, which is, do you think women, biological women, should have their own spaces, their own change rooms, their own sports, their own prisons, their own homeless shelters? This is actually a serious issue.
yes, 100%. It's not culture war bullshit.
No.
It's very I think it's valid. It's
And
a very good point.
this guy, right after I asked the question, he says, that's the strangest question I've ever heard at one of these, debates or whatever. I said, in a good way? And he goes, no, in a bad way. Like, what does this even matter? And I said, Correction Services Canada put out a very robust report about a very serious issue of women being raped in women's prisons by men. There's a rape shelter in Vancouver that had its funding cut off because they will not allow men into the women's rape shelter. I think that like there are very few issues on which 99% of us can find common agreement. Men and women's rape shelters, I think, is one common issue we could all agree this is ridiculous.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit crazy that that's even a thing. To be honest.
Yes.
And like I want to preface this to like to anybody who might be listening to like I'm sure you probably feel the same way, but I'm not like some sort of like bigoted anti-gay, anti-trans person, you know what I mean? Like I like there's nuances to these conversations for sure, but like a women's shelter for survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence.
So Megan
These
Murphy,
are probably like the least like these people probably don't want to see men in there.
and the homeless shelters thing is another component because Megan Murphy, she was she was one of the first pioneers, right? She's considered one of the original trans exclusionary radical feminists because she was defending this Vancouver rape shelter. But when we were talking about the issue, we realized that like this Correctional Services Canada report is so useful because they're the only group that actually knows how many men are in the institution versus women. Because when a trans woman goes to a rape shelter, they don't say like, can you please pull down your pants and show us your genitals? Like before you get your room, like, because
Of
you
course
don't,
not.
of course not, because they have an expectation, as they should, to privacy, right? That's their rights. So I think that this issue, though, in homeless shelters, in that case, is probably very understated, right? There's probably a lot more sexual assaults and perverted activity and all kinds of stuff going on that we know nothing about. Because how would you even report on it, really? Like,
Yeah, totally. Like the statistics wouldn't be available as like as probably they shouldn't be. But
Right.
Yeah. It's sort
Although
of a catch-22 there, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, like you kind of know a man when you see them, though, I guess, don't you? Or like kind of to some extent.
These days.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah. Yeah, but like I wanted to ask you about like the second day of the debates, because that video of you getting escorted out of the building that by like literal riot cops, it's terrifying.
Yeah, so it was really strange. So what happened was that day, I was just doing like, like little videos outside. I thought it was a totally copacetic day. There was a rule that said each outlet was only allowed to ask one question per debate. And the only exceptions were CBC and Rebel, because Rebel had sued. And the logic behind that was that the CBC said we have regional outlets. So we have CBC BC, CBC Ontario, so on and so forth. So we should get one question per region. And Rebel said, well, we all are also multi-regional. But that's really besides the point. What happened though is yeah, we were all like waiting to like ask our questions, and all these rumors started coming out that they were going to cancel the scrum before anybody like was even preparing their questions. And then the debates commission, Michel Cormier guy, came out and he goes, we are canceling the debate because we cannot promise a safe and secure environment. There was a little bit of a brouhaha about that, like who's responsible for this. There was a lot of fighting. So I just walked out. And then as I was walking out, I was like 5 feet behind David Menzies and Alexa Lavoie as they were chasing that CBC guy who actually I had met him like a few hours earlier, like just really randomly, because I was just a friendly guy, right? So I was just kind of talking to everybody. I don't remember his name or anything, so I can't positively identify him, but apparently he hit Lincoln J. And then, yeah, and then we walked out. There was riot police everywhere. And we went around the corner. We could not get back in to get our stuff. So there was a rumor going around that we were waiting for David Cochran and Rosie Barton to come out so we could like assault them. But actually, like Alexa Lavoie just like wanted to get her umbrella, and David Menzies just wanted to get his keys. Yeah, man, it was completely it was cuckoo.
There was a rumor going around that you guys were waiting to assault Rosemary Barton.
Yeah, this was like, yeah, that was a rumor that had been going around. So it's really strange. Okay, so the babies out. My God, it's like traumatic just to think about how strange it was. So there was like a movie theater, right? And that's where the debate scrum happens. And then there were a bunch of outdoor porta potties. That's where you would go to the bathroom. But between that's where the Power and Politics tent was. So we were walking by these CBC people. They're talking shit about us on the air, and we're just walking past them as they're talking shit about us to like go take a shit, basically. And I guess what happened is at one point, Ezra Levant, like, because they weren't even on air, he was being, I think, a professional about it. You can go watch the video. He went up to Rosie Barton and David Cochran and was like, hey, you guys have been talking a bunch of shit about me and my reporters. Like, if you want to say it, like, just say it to my face. And they made a big stink about it. So then apparently the debate commission had asked Ezra Levant to leave, and he refused to leave. And there was also this crazy thing where they started accusing us of all being like working together. Me, the Rebel News people, the Western Standard people. There was like maybe 15 of us, like independent media people. Like we're just people that don't take subsidies from the government. So we just kind of came together like a little team because they were being mean to us. It was like Mean Girls.
That's the most absurd thing I've ever heard in my life is like you guys like, I know like to an outsider, like maybe you could like anybody who's like not plugged into this like online world, I could see how you might think that. Like if you're just like a sedentary CTV watcher, like that might be like your understanding of it. You might look at all of these as like alt-right like internet blogs or something, but like no, the idea of you and like working with Rebel Media and stuff, it just seems a little absurd to me.
Never met
but
any of these people in person ever in my life, not one of them. We were all meeting for the first time that day.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. Like I don't know, like again, like these people you think would know better, but like I'm not trying to defend them, but maybe they genuinely did believe that. Like maybe
So,
they
like,
do know nothing about you guys. I have no
they
idea,
knew
but that's
nothing. They knew nothing, and they created this conspiracy theory in their head, right? That like maybe like and like I don't know, like we're really what the conspiracy theory even is. But I met Key and Bexty and I went on like a little signal chat, and we were trying to figure out where the scrum line would start. So him and I were just like trying to figure that out. I guess that was like two people conspiring. We had never met each other before. We were just conspiring to get to the front of the line, which I
yeah,
think
of
is
course.
kind of the job.
To maybe do your job. I don't know.
Right?
That might be it. I mean, you don't have like the millions of taxpayer funded dollars coming to your organization that these people do. Like you don't have that advantage.
Well, and this is the thing that like I keep ruminating about. Like, if it is my fault that the second day got canceled, and if it is, I apologize. I wish everybody can get a question, of course. But if the issue is that some gonzo homeless looking journalist got to the front of the line, like, isn't that the bigger story? We spend more money on media subsidies than we do on disability benefits and pharmacare combined. Like, and some homeless guy like beat all of them. Like, isn't that what the moral outrage should be over? Not that the homeless guy got a question.
You're right. That should be the story.
Like, are we
100%.
really getting our money's worth here?
No, we're not. And all right, Alex, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show, man. Before you
Johnny.
jump off, though, can you remind everybody how they can follow your work?
Sure, yeah, I'm at True North Wire, so you can follow me on Substack. Juno News also publishes a lot of my work there. And True North is a registered nonprofit, so anybody that wants to support me can support them, which is great.
Absolutely. I'll put links to all of those in the description. Alex, man, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
And that's my show for today, guys. I had a blast talking to Alex, and I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I did making it. And I'll remind you again that I'm going to leave links to Alex's work in the description so you can follow him if you wish. And as always, like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.